If this kind of measured, practical storytelling sits well with you, a quiet light goes a long way. What's your biggest pain today? Are you at war with debts, trapped in grinding routine, short on support, or facing relentless competition? Leave a note below. Your answer frames the lesson we're about to draw. Imagine dawn in a landscape where normal had been erased. Mud, snow, and dust stitched themselves into the seams of a world that needed solutions faster than factories could plan them. In a cramped shop lit by a single bulb, an engineer bent over a stripping of blueprints, grease under his nails, squinting at a sketch that dared to be simple. Few parts, strong chassis, all-terrain reach. Across the bench, a weary officer tapped the metal with his knuckles and said, almost casually, "It must take people and stores and messages across anything. Can you make it?" The reply was not a promise but a protocol. "We'll make it go." That urgency, the blunt demand for a machine that would not break when everything else did, is the crucible where the Jeep was born. You see it not as nostalgia, but as a set of decisions under fire. Drop the ornamentation, embrace modularity, design for repair with whatever you can find at midnight in a bombed-out depot. Soldiers with names and lives improvised solutions in the field. A broken axle became a lesson, a welded patch became a standard. The vehicle's character hardened in those cold nights and hot deserts, a language of bolts and torque written in the margins of survival. Listen for the human sounds behind the metal. The laughter of men who had nothing but pride, the hesitant cheer when a prototype climbed a slope that should have stopped it, the quiet conversation about how to make this practical for families once the guns fell silent. That transfer from battlefield necessity to civilian utility is not accidental. It is deliberate, like teaching a tough lesson in vocabulary. Resilience first, then meaning. If you want to follow how wartime improvisation was translated into a global brand and learn how to apply that same stubborn durability to your own work, subscribe and stay with us. Next, we step into the factory lines and foxholes where design met demand and trace the exact moments a rugged tool became an icon. Dawn on a European field is raw and immediate. Wet canvas, diesel breath, men with mud up to their knees and a machine that refuses to stop. Engineers and mechanics learned fast that design could not be theoretical. It had to be reparable with a pocket knife and elbow grease. In a makeshift garage behind the lines, a corporal leans over a dented grill and says to a young factory mechanic, "We need something that won't quit when the map does." The mechanic answers, "Then we build it so a farmer can fix it." That exchange captures the practical philosophy driving every welded seam and stamped panel. Simplicity as an ethic, durability as a promise. On the road from prototype to production, urgency became a teacher. Weight was shaved where possible. Clearance and short overhangs were exaggerated so the vehicle could climb out of cratered fields. Mechanical components were standardized so spare parts could be swapped by inexperienced hands under shellfire. Designers traced battle needs onto paper. A flat hood for stretcher placement, a narrow wheelbase to thread through bomb streets, a robust four-wheel drive that dispersed torque like a lifeline. Field improvisation did the rest. Radios strapped to passenger seats, ropes threaded through tow hooks, soldiers folding the windshield down to escape shrapnel, and those makeshift solutions fed back into factory drawings. There were practical moments of human ingenuity that read like parables. A gunner, pinned on a slope, remembered a winch jury-rigged from a bootlace and a sapling. The Jeep pulled him free. An engineer later said, "We weren't building glamour. We were building answers to questions no one wanted asked twice." That answer shaped the Jeep's soul. It was unapologetically utilitarian, and people came to trust it not for beauty but for reliability when everything else had failed. When the guns fell silent, that trust became currency. Soldiers returned with a clear-eyed expectation. They wanted workhorses that would plow fields, tow trailers, and take families to market. Manufacturers began to see a new market logic: translate battlefield credibility into everyday value without diluting the machine's honesty. The transition was not automatic. It required restraint, marketing that honored function over flourish, and a willingness to let a vehicle's history be its brand. If you find that those lessons, build to be fixed, prioritize use over image, speak to your struggle today, tell me, what's your biggest obstacle now? In the next part, we'll follow how that wartime DNA survived corporate pressures and cultural shifts to become an icon, and what that survival teaches anyone building in hostile conditions. The moment of truth came not in a test track but under a gray, indifferent sky where maps were torn and radios hissed. A jeep crawling through mud in a narrow North African pass, its radiator steaming, a medic wedged on the tailgate as men grunted to push. That image is the crucible. Mechanics welded makeshift brackets with flashlight sparks. A lieutenant hollered, "Hold her steady!" And the vehicle kept going, carrying radios, rations, and a stubborn belief that something simple, sturdy, and honest could alter outcomes. Those improvised repairs, the repeated fording of rivers and climbing of ridgelines, were not failures but experiments, brutal, iterative, and instructive. Designers watched from field tents and forwarded notes. Shorten the hood, raise the air intake, strengthen the axle, keep it fixable by hand with what's at hand. On the beaches of Normandy and the boggy trails of Burma, the Jeep revealed a pattern, reliability born of austerity. Its body was not beautiful by peacetime standards, but it respected function. Soldiers named it, adapted it, and trusted it with human lives. A captain would later say, quietly as night fell on frostbitten ground, "We didn't just use it, it kept us moving when everything else folded." That testimony became gospel. The Jeep's character, utilitarian, fearless, democratic, was stamped into every welded seam and bolt. When war paused, industry faced a different theater, the market. The same attributes that had carried missions now sold to families and adventurers, but only because the story behind them was authentic. The practical lesson is precise. Build under pressure, test in the worst conditions, then translate those hard-earned truths into a narrative people can trust. Toughness alone isn't brand. Credibility is. The Jeep taught us to let utility shape identity and to let lived performance become the brand promise. If this scene resonates, if you're wrestling with a problem that demands a lean, tested solution, tell me, what battle are you facing today? If you find value here, a simple like helps these stories keep rolling. Up next, we trace how that wartime ethos was repackaged for peacetime roads and how the Jeep learned to be both weapon and lifestyle. When the dust finally settled, the truth about the Jeep was simple and honest. It was born because there was no other option. In a muddy field at dawn, a sergeant muttered, "It gets us there," and an engineer in a dim workshop answered, "Then make it so it keeps getting us there." Those two sentences, practical, unromantic, relentless, became the vehicle's DNA. You can still see it in the rattling hinges, the squat stance, the way a door closes with the same confirmation as a mission completed. The battlefield taught engineers how to prioritize durability over ornament, simplicity over excess, and modular thinking over fragile perfection. That brutal, urgent logic is what allowed a utilitarian machine to survive conflict and then translate its credibility into civilian trust. On the showroom floor, the Jeep became a promise wrapped in consumer-friendly features, comfort, styling, and a language of freedom. But the soul remained. Owners spoke in the same vernacular as soldiers: reliability, adaptability, a readiness to face the unknown. An old mechanic once told me, wiping oil from his hands, "People buy it because it remembers how to be useful." That line is the practical lesson for any maker or leader. Design first for the worst conditions your product will face. If it survives there, it will earn loyalty everywhere else. This story is not just nostalgia. It's a blueprint. Hard test your ideas in hostile settings, simplify until each part earns its place, and tell the story of origin honestly. Customers sense authenticity. Translate rugged capability into everyday benefits. Ease of repair becomes lower total cost of ownership. Modular gear becomes customization and community. That translation is where brands turn toughness into desirability. If this episode resonated, a small like helps us keep digging. I want to know, what's your biggest fight today? Debts, routine, lack of support, competition? Share it below. Your struggle is the first step to strategy. If you'd like more films that turn machines into roadmaps for resilience, stay with us. There are more lessons waiting on the next horizon.